Hello YouTube, welcome to a new podcast with Anadi. Today we're going to talk about cutting, so specifically on how to get into summer shape or like your 8 to 10% body fat. Let's say you're preparing for the summer. In previous podcast though, we talked about bulking season and how to approach that, so if you're interested, go check that one as well. So now I would like to leave the word to Anadi. So how would you start the cut?
Hello guys. Welcome to a new episode. Yeah, the cut, how would we approach that? So basically, we coming maybe out of an off season, we would like to have a favorable condition for that. So we don't want to be our most amount of body fat at that time. We want to be at a position where we know that our body works great with the body fat we carry. So we will not be lean at that point in time, but we will also not have like very much fat on our front side. We want to still have a nice front side. We want to have like some striations, seeing slightly our abs. We don't want to lose that. More fat is not always better. Being heavier is not always better, especially in the bulk. It can go downwards like insulin sensitivity, your blood pressure and all these kinds of things. We want to have like a normal range of blood sugar at that time where we change into a cut, and we want to have a normal blood glucose levels. Also, we want to have not a huge toxicity in our system, so we don't want to be like carrying a lot of drugs in our systems at that time. So basically having like a good standpoint for increasing or decreasing calories. So at that point in time, we have a lot of food in us, look good still, but we have also a point where we can decrease, especially for a woman who wants to decrease her body fat levels. When a woman starts a cut on like 1,800 calories, she will maybe end on 600 calories at the end of her diet. That's not realistic. That's also a very bad point for the hormonal status of her. Also for us guys, we don't want to start our cut with maybe like just 2,500 calories or 2,200 calories. We will go downwards to 1,000 calories and maybe lose in that process a lot of muscle if we do it naturally. So we want to have our system working also at a very high standpoint. That's for the starting point where we would start a diet. Diet we would approach from different standpoints. We have the main 4 points, which I know off the top of my head, are the nutrition, is the training, is the cardio, and the supplements. Let's do 5 points, and the steroids. The first 3 to 4 are the main ones because everything else is irrelevant. If I would do it like very simple, we would increase the caloric deficit to its maximum, like have a deficit of 1,000 calories per week, take a shit ton of gear, and retain by that pathway a lot of muscle and lose very quickly fat. But that's not a good way to handle the most optimal diet. So what we would do is we start from the end of our off season, in this phase where we don't take a lot of drugs, take a lot of food. We start slowly decreasing the food and implement steps into our days. We would maybe also already have a step count in our off season, just because steps help elongate our lives, are essential for good longevity. And so we have also normal amounts of cardio, not like these drastic increases to 600 minutes per week. We start by implementing the most stress. We don't want to increase the most stress in our bodies at that point in time. We want to increase the amount of output by simple ways. So steps are one of them. Training is the second. And the last one we would increase is the cardio. So we have the output we have and the input we have. So the calories we take in also decrease. The output increases. The caloric output by steps would go upwards by 1,000 steps per week if we don't reduce our weight, and the calories would reduce slowly by 200 calories per week. That's where we would have already in the first week, we would see changes. That's the beginning of the diet.
Okay, so if I understand that you correctly, so first you would have a client on as high calories as possible to start the cut by the end of his off season, and then you would first start to implement more steps without any cardio, or would you pair that with cardio?
Maybe, especially my clients, they have already some cardio in their off season.
Yeah,
that's the baseline cardio. That's what.
How much, for example?
30 minutes, 4 times per week.
Okay, plus like 8 to 10,000 steps, something like that.
6 to 8,000 steps. It depends who's the person.
Yeah.
If the person is already having a good metabolism, already constantly completely lean, I have to keep them a little bit lower and let them do faster cardio in the morning, just because of their insulin sensitivity to increase and also the hunger signaling during their off season. Exactly.
So when you just mentioned fasted cardio, there is that debate going on. Like, would you say that like doing cardio in the fasted state is better than doing cardio in the fat state?
Yes, it's interesting because we are always just talking about the fat loss. It's not just relevant for fat loss doing cardio fasted or unfasted. Calorie output will still be the same. The one thing I see doing cardio fasted is having a great start into a day. Like having already something active done in the morning early will make you better ready for the rest of the day. Getting up, eating your first meal without being active or something, having something done, will tend to increase your blood glucose levels slightly higher than before doing a round of cardio like 30 minutes. So we have already the glucose in the morning, which will not increase too high, which will in the midday drop drastically, and we will get like very tired. A lot of people have like this midday down. Most of them you could erase that by just increasing the amount of cardio they do in the morning, and they will have like more active day in the end. So that's the main part for me, doing faster cardio. Faster cardio with drugs is another great option. So with drugs, if we're talking, we have the better release of fat into our bloodstream and the burning of this energy during this point in time. Because in no other time of the day we will be so long fasted, and we will have the potential to release so much fats by using GH, by using yohimbine, by using clenbuterol or other drugs. But this will be one thing where we will talk at the end. But that's for fasted versus non-fasted cardio. Both will spend calories, but one is better for the activity over the day and for the blood glucose.
Okay, so where did we stop? So basically, you would start client on as high calories as possible, and then once you hit the plateau, you would decrease the calories or increase the step count. Or I didn't really understand you when you said before.
What do you mean?
How would you approach, like, you start fat loss on certain calories, certain cardio. Let's say you're my coach now, and you coach me. We're doing 3,000 calories per day on average. We're doing 10,000 steps and 30 minutes of cardio per day. So let's say now I hit the fat loss plateau. What would you do? Like, would you increase my cardio? Would you increase my steps? Or would you decrease my calories? Or do like a little bit of everything?
My clients always track their biofeedback, so that they track me their stress levels, they track me their digestion and their appetite levels, and they track for me the most relevant feedback in which I can change the directions. If I have a client who has already a huge amount of stress, like a 10 out of 10, basically every day completely stressed, if I add on that stress another 30 minutes of cardio each day, it will be completely fucked. If I add that person 1,000 steps per day, it's like just change the parking spot per day, like a little bit farther away from the point where you go shopping, or just take don't take the elevator, just take the stairs. Try to walk more on your work. Don't go by bus or something. So you can increase these steps better than increasing cardio, because the amount of the cardio a person must do will be dependent of if the person has a cardio equipment at home, like a bike or a walking pad or a Stairmaster or something. Nobody will have a Stairmaster in their apartment, but you know what I'm talking. If they live close by a gym, it's not a problem. But if they live like 10, 15 minutes per day outside from a gym, it's like already an hour per day, which they have to spend just to do like 30 minutes of cardio additionally. Especially if the appetite of a person is already very high, so the food focus. If you're on 3,000 calories and you feel that your food focus is very high, we also don't increase the cardio, don't decrease the calories, we just increase the steps. Because an increase in steps will not be so hunger-inducing as a cardio session. Step counts will be more easy for you to do, will also have a certain output, and you will still lose weight by that pathway. We have always to think of these things. The food focus will reduce as the longer we stay on these calories. It's like a different. It's like a different story if you're like on 1,000 calories. But if you're on 3,000 calories, you have a slight food focus. We just stay a little bit longer at that calories, increase the steps a little bit, and you will still drop.
Okay, thank you. So, next thing I wanted to discuss was nutritional choices. So, like, we're talking now just about the calories, but how would you, for example, make the macro split for someone that is trying to lose fat? So I would guess that like you would keep protein high, but like I want to know like how high would you have the protein, like how many grams per kilogram, and then how high would you have the fats? Like okay, it also like depends on a person, depends on whether the client is female or male. And how would you do with the carbs? Like, would you have carbs like all days the same, or would you carb cycle, or would you have some zero carb days in between, or how would you approach that?
So the carb cycling stuff is always relevant for me, just because I have like it always implemented training days and non-training days, the simplest form of carb cycling. So the days we train, we have pre, intra, post workout nutrition. The days we don't train, we don't have these calories. So that's on some guys like can be up to 800 to 1,000 calories, because they have to shovel so many carbs into their system, having like the proteins pre and post workout, having like the intra workout containing of a lot of carbs. I think you had like a very big intra workout. How big is your intra workout, if I can ask you quickly?
Lately, I've started doing 200 grams of carbs intra-workout. So, I mean powdered carbs, you know, because like before that I was eating like now I'm on like approximately 5,200 calories per day, every day, even on rest days. And before that I was eating like, you know, those big meals before workout and all that, and it didn't really end up well, because I felt like I'm digesting food during the workout, you know, and that's during the workout, of course, there's not an ideal time to have digestion going on. So that's why I reduced my pre-workout meal. I stopped eating as much pre-workout, and I rather introduced more intra-workout carbs. So I started to drink those like already pre-digested carbs that absorb very easily, you know, with EAAs. So I'm like using my natural insulin to its max, you know.
So you have like this already this big intra-workout, and that's the point. You have a certain amount more calories than you would have on your rest days, in my opinion. So this intra-workout by itself contains, just by calculation, 200 grams of carbs. 4 calories per gram of carbs, 800 calories, some EAAs into it, 20 to 30 grams. We have already 1,000 calories in your intra-workout. It would just not be there on a rest day. So you would have already a slight carb cycling. That's the one I always tend to have. The people have always more calories on the training days than on the rest days. It's always the amount during their workout, their peri-workout nutrition. That's the biggest part they will reduce on rest days. So on rest days, they will have also the slightly lower expenditure. If they don't do 2 times cardio per day, if it's not needed at that time, they won't have like this hunger that's needed for that. They will retain good sensitivity during their rest days, just because of the drop slightly. I don't have low carb days. I tend to leave that to the end of a very, very intense diet, just due to the low carb, no carb, due to the fueling of the energy systems, and due to the hunger increase, which it can bring drastically.
What about the refeeds and the cheat meals? Do you include any of those in your clients' programs?
During a diet, we don't want only, or a cut for the summer, we want to have a huge implement of micronutrient dense foods. That's basically the baseline of a diet. Most people make it more difficult than it is. The diet consists mostly of these because they have the most volume. So you will be always satiated. Yeah, it's way easier to use processed food because it's like very easy to handle and you don't have to cook it as long. But the unprocessed foods, the micronutrient dense food, will bring food volume and bring micronutrients to the table, which will increase your longevity, which will increase your productivity in the day. So I always tell my clients, food that you bring to the table that has a lot of micronutrients will also be a good focused food. You can be focused more during the day just because of the increase in micronutrients.
Yeah.
So cheat meals or refeeds, as you said, can be implemented, especially refeeds. Cheat meals we don't implement just because of the not needing of a cheat meal. A cheat meal is like an excuse for poor habits. We want to have, as long as possible, a good connection to food. A cheat meal suggests me that I cheat on something, and I never want to cheat on something. I don't want to cheat on my girlfriend. I don't want to cheat on my boss. I don't want to cheat in the training. I want to do my shit clean. So basically, if I start to cheat, I start to lie to myself. So I give my clients like, you are cheating. No, my clients mostly have meals which they can have for social occasions. Like if they have like a birthday, I tell them, enjoy your birthday, don't go overboard, have a meal with your family, but that's a meal which you can enjoy. That's not a cheat meal, that's a free meal which you can enjoy with and for your family. Go back on your diet the rest of the day. If it's like in the evening, the day during, you eat veggies and proteins, and in the evening you have your free meal. You enjoy it. Refeeds we implement in cuts. So a refeed can be implemented to decrease the fatigue we have increasing during the time period. If you look at the cut, it's maybe from 12 to 16 to 20 weeks. We can put refeeds in different time spans, like every 8 weeks having a refeed to just decrease the fatigue of the diet, especially in training performance, which will eventually happen because it's just because you're lighter, you will have like a heavier, more difficult time to move weights. So we decrease the fatigue we carry on. We have a little bit more life quality during these refeeds. We still have like micronutrient dense food. We don't start to implement a shit food like gummy bears or sugary foods. We still take our micronutrient dense foods, rice, kidney beans or something like that, which gives something to the table. Fibers especially also very relevant for good digestion. So also on those refeeds relevant. Just because you increase your calorie, it doesn't mean you have to take like 600 to 800 grams of carbs from rice. The variation on these days is also a very important part. So keeping on these refeed days a little bit more life quality in front of you is very important. Just to stick through the diet. So 12 to 20 weeks can be for certain people a long time. And so having a different variation for these people is easy.
Would you say that like when you implement a refeed day, would you give it on a training day or it could also be a rest day?
Refeed days would be always for me on a longer time span. So a refeed would always consist of 4 to 6 days.
So you wouldn't do like 1 day refeed and like give client like 800 grams of carbs 1 day. You would rather do it like over the longer period of time.
Exactly. Just because another very important part, it's the...
So that would like be like a short diet break for like 4 or 5 days, something like that, I guess.
Exactly. The diet break for the increase of the life quality, because just from 1 day the person won't have experienced the life quality, but also the bettering of the thyroid hormones. So we see the increase of thyroid hormones during intense cut cannot be reversed by just 1 day of increase of calories. it has to be during a longer time period, and the longer time period is basically 2 to 4 days. So I elongate it by a little bit more just to have like a slightly bigger increase, and then continue on with the diet.
And how often during the cut would you implement those refeeds? Like, again, it highly depends on a person probably, but like in general, like usually how often do you do it on average?
On average, one refeed in the middle of the cut if it's needed. It's always really relevant. So if I see the fatigue in the person is very high, so the training performance decreases to zero, they can perform anymore, they don't get pumps anymore, they are basically always sore, they don't have the same expenditure, they sort of plateau, I give them the refeed and they immediately drop again. So it's always also dependent on when the person needs it. So if I don't see the need in the middle of the cycle, I just elongate it a little bit farther, a little bit farther, a little bit farther. And maybe you have somebody who doesn't even need it. You have maybe somebody who has like such a good metabolism, which will push completely through the diet without any issues.
Okay, so let's get back to macronutrients. Now you talked about the carb cycling. Now, how much would you keep how high would you have the protein and the fats during the cut? Like in general, how would you split the macros that you have available?
From the protein standpoint, I would tend to go to the upper range from 2.5 to 3.3 grams per kilogram of body weight. For simplicity, 2.5 to 3 grams is enough. So basically, keeping it at the higher end. Having somebody who's constantly hungry, I would also try to increase it even a little bit higher if it's possible for the digestion of the person, if she doesn't get a lot of bloating or gas. For the fats, if the person is natural, I would try to keep it as long as possible on 0.6 to 0.8 grams per kilogram of body weight. If the person is not natural, I can reduce it to zero, basically just by 2 trace fats.
That's because of the hormone production, right?
Exactly. I could increase the omega-3 fatty acids in enhanced athletes a little bit higher, just to have the essential fatty acids from there on a high point, like 5 gram EPA, DHA max. And for the carbs, I would just fill the rest up. So that's totally dependent how many calories a person has remaining. So the rest would be carbs, always.
And would you say that like carbs are like the least important macronutrient, and like you would always like first cut the carbs and then cut the other things if needed?
Yes, especially in women. So if you look at the woman, we know that they both work on different systems. So they have a time during their cycle where they work much better on fats, and a time during their cycle where they are very insulin sensitive, where they work better on carbs. So doing their carb cycling is very important. So you can't say in women that this is more important than that, because you have to put it on the same hierarchy. Where is she on a cycle? For a male, yeah, totally. If he's enhanced, cut it completely fats and then carbs, because we can keep carbs as long as high as possible for the performance in the gym. Okay,
so and what would be like the lowest number that you would go with fats, both for men and women?
For both men and women, it's very difficult. So in a cut where she can look good, it's very context dependent how much cardio she already does. So if a person does 600 minutes of cardio each week, that's like 8 times 70 plus 40 minutes, 8 times 70 minutes cardio per week. So that's like basically the biggest amount I would see somebody do cardio. If it's very needed, then we could go downwards to 20-30 grams if the person wants to have really the summer look. It's not healthy, definitely not, but it will result in the look for a photo shooting. It will result in the look for the summer, to have like a six-pack, to look lean. For male, you can decrease it basically to zero, especially because we know men have below a certain body fat percentage, the production of our hormones decrease. So that's also the point. So being at like 12 to 15% is okay for our hormonal production. Below, being like 8 to 10%, like summer lean, having like perfect chiseled abs, like striations on your delts, on your arms, it's like, okay, there will hormone production on a natural man be reduced. If you're talking enhanced, you can decrease it in both types of persons to 0. And just keep the essential fatty acids in.
But you never use like the approach to do with someone like a keto diet or low carb, high fat or something like that.
Yes, that's context dependent. If the person did already a keto diet and knows that it works for the person very well, yeah, definitely. We can decrease the carbs and go just by keto. But that's always very person dependent. We know as for sure that the one most relevant energy system we need, or not energy system, macronutrient, is the protein. So we can basically push everything to 0 and just eat proteins. Our body cannot store fat from proteins. It's not possible.
But you think that your brain can actually function normally if you go like below, let's say, 30 grams of fats for longer periods of time?
That's something that the person must accept if they want to look like that. So okay. Your brain won't function very normal if you want to look like that. So I think most people have to accept it if you want to like look like lean and have like normal brain functioning. This will not be normal on 8 to 10% of body fat. You will have either to take drugs that we will talk like afterwards, or have like very good genetics, like from metabolism standpoint. You have certain people who can live like basically look jack shit and be like 8 to 10% and be like high performing every day. But it's not applicable for 99%, 90% of the people. 10% maybe, yeah. I know some people who can do that, but not all.
Okay, so the one last thing I would like to ask you about the nutrition during the cut is like, what food choices, like what foods would you pick? What protein sources, what carb sources, what fat sources? As you said, like probably during the cut when we're already depriving ourselves from calories and macronutrients, we at least want to have like fulfill all our micronutrient needs. So we are not like, besides being calorie deficient, also becoming micronutrient deficient. So I guess you would like to implement something that is like really macronutrient dense and stick to those foods mostly, and not eat something like rice and all those micronutrient deprived foods like a lot of people do during their cuts.
Yeah, so especially if you're talking like having a high volume food, carb sources are very relevant to choose very context dependent on the person. So if I have somebody who digests potatoes very well, I will put potatoes in their diet. Somebody will tell me, hey, I can't digest potatoes, I have like a very bad gut. I will try to fix that, but if needed, we can add rice into that person if it's easier for her, and if she doesn't get like the digestive issues. But on a regular, you would choose like high volume carb sources. Take a lot of veggies, eat potatoes, look for these ones especially. Sweet potatoes is also a very good option if you can implement those. That's for that. Oats you can put in the morning. I would tend to especially have like a very high fiber food, fibrous food in the morning especially, but I wouldn't like consist a complete day of oats.
Okay. And what I wanted to also ask you is, then protein sources obviously stay the same as during the bulk, and fats you probably don't really add extra fat sources during the cut. You just get what you get from things like meats and egg yolks and stuff like that, you know.
Exactly.
So yeah, I think that's everything that I wanted to discuss about the nutrition. Now I suggest we move on to cardio and touch a little bit of that as well. So about the cardio, like what type of cardio would you have your clients doing? So you probably, I guess, would avoid things like HIIT, high intensity interval trainings, because you put extra recovery demands to your body and you get yourself easily into overtrained state. So I guess you would stick to like low to moderate intensity cardio for most of the time. And I also want to know what cardio machines do you think are the best in like burning calories? Like, would you do bike? Would you do Stairmaster? Would you do elliptical? Like, what would you do?
So the one which which reduces the stress on people the most is like something without a high knee flexion or a high hip flexion. So a Stairmaster is for most of the people always associated with high knee flexion just because of the steps and also hip flexion. So having already those during a certain amount of time can increase like stuff like cramping in these things, or in certain people also decrease the recoverability of the workouts. So having a Stairmaster in can be beneficial because it burns a shit ton of energy, because it's like very intense. It's like very demanding for our body to do like these steps during a certain period of time, like half an hour. Like if somebody has ever done like a half an hour on a Stairmaster, it's no comparison to half an hour of a bike. So you're like drained in sweat, like after an hour of Stairmaster, you drained the entire Stairmaster. On a cardio bike, you can like chill an hour and it's okay. On a Stairmaster, you have like basically on the lowest intensity already increased heart rate. On a bike, you have to increase the resistance drastically. So it's always like give and take, give and take. In the end of the diet, yes, I can put in some Stairmaster, but from the starting point, I would never just increase the amount of cardio just done by the Stairmaster.
How about the elliptical?
Elliptical can be very good just because we're doing something standing and also not having like this degree of high knee flexion.
Yeah, plus you have arms in there, so the blood circulation is good and you burn a lot of calories, I guess.
Totally, you would burn in the end the most in something that's applicable for you. So like if I have somebody who's very small and who has like to take huge steps on a Stairmaster, it's not applicable for her. An elliptical may be better, bike even the best for the person. So for a big person, the elliptical is great. A Stairmaster is not so good just because of the like small steps you start to do. Just because you have like these huge steps you can do just because of your length of your bones. So that's like a difference.
But you would probably never recommend anyone to do like a running or how is that jumping rope, because it's probably just too heavy on recovery.
Yes, I have persons who like to do jumping ropes, so I keep it in. But I always tell them if you feel that your joints start to hurt, we would start to reduce that. It's always like if the person likes to do that, why should I take it away? It still burns calorie. It's not like something that's not cardio demanding. It will still burn the calorie needs.
Okay. So is there anything more we forgot to add about cardio?
The duration, I think the max would be, as I said before, 70 minutes per session. If it's not possible for the person, I would split it up to 2 times per day. That's the one thing. If you do it fasted and you're enhanced, take your fat burners before it. Yeah.
So just to mention, like, since we are talking about getting in your best shape, so all those things you should increase gradually. So for example, you start at the highest calories possible and the lowest amount of cardio, and then when you hit the plateau, you start to increase the calorie deficit by either like increasing your expenditure or decreasing your calories. So you obviously wouldn't start your diet on like 70 minutes of cardio straight away, you would start on like, let's say 20 to 30 minutes, and then over the weeks of dieting you would slowly increase, so you're by the end on like, let's say 60 to 70 minutes max. Now I think that's pretty much it about the cardio. I suggest we move on to the natural supplement. So do you find anything that is like that you can find in the over-the-counter supplement store that could be useful during the cutting period, besides like if you're not talking like about the health supplements? I think like those are useful pretty much year round. So like something that would specifically help you burn more fat and that is like completely legal and natural.
In most countries, yohimbine is legal, as I know, but in the different countries, yohimbine is not legal. So yohimbine would be one certain product which you could use as a natural to burn just slightly bit more body fat. The combination for enhanced would be way better with clenbuterol, but for a natural, yohimbine would be the go-to supplement which could help in a caloric deficit at the end of the diet to reduce more body fat. So that's the most important thing I could see. taking as your omega-3s, taking your vitamin D3, taking your multivitamins, taking your creatine, everything, that it will be good. But
how about the caffeine during the diet to like suppress appetite, to increase the expenditure?
At some point in time, you will be so caffeine intolerant that you will take like a gram of caffeine and feel nothing.
Yeah,
so you're basically like me, running on 6 monsters per day and like 8 coffees, and you feel nothing. Like basically I can drink coffee before my sleep, and my Oura ring doesn't measure any bad sleep. It measures just good sleep, because my body doesn't react anymore even to the certain amount of caffeine I take per day. So that's like that. Caffeine can be such a good performance enhancer at the gym. So if I could choose keeping my performance at the high or having a decreased appetite, I would take like chewing gum and chew the complete day, constantly chewing gum, before I would take the entire day, like 6 cans of these, and save it up to before my training. I'll take like 600 milligrams of caffeine and have like a good workout. Just because like caffeine is like such a good performance enhancing drug. It was for a certain time a drug for performance enhancing.
But would you say that caffeine's performance boosting benefits still last even after you develop a tolerance to it?
Yes, because you don't. The funny part is you don't take it like for the entire day. You just take it for a specific time per day, and not each day. So if I train 4 times per week, I have like 4 times 600 milligrams. I don't run on 6 per day of these, which would be in the end 800 milligrams of caffeine every fucking day. So the slight difference, where we would always have like this resensitization during the off periods, on, off, on. Like the caffeine system is not like something which can be, which will not be suppressed immediately. It takes a lot of time to like have the decent sensitization.
Okay. Then I also wanted to ask you, like oral L-carnitine and things like CLA. Those probably won't really help in fat loss, right?
No, zero. Basically, L-carnitine can help,
but injectable form, or
yeah, injectable, and like especially another form, L-carnitine, L-tartrate, I think, was it?
That's an oral form, or
L-carnitine, L-tartrate, I think, was an. It has some certain studies on it done, but I think it was more like something cognitive enhancement. Yeah, look, I found the study immediately. It has potential to prevent exercise fatigue, muscle weakness, and decreases the free radicals in our system. So we have some benefits from L-carnitine which are not directly to fat loss, but maybe in the diet, yeah.
Yeah. So if we conclude on short, what over-the-counter supplements would you use during the fat loss phase? So
for the over-the-counter, we take omega-3 at a high dose, 3 to 5 grams EPA DHA, creatine 5 to 10 grams per day. Somebody who needs more takes more. Our EAAs for intra-workout. We take our multivitamin. We take our curcumin to reduce inflammation. We take maybe our N-acetylcysteine, basically all the health supplements. I don't have to count all of those up. Look at Gregor's channel, he has a lot of videos on those. The health supplements, and the yohimbine, and caffeine for the performance enhancing properties which it contains. But basically, we don't have to choose different stuff. It's basically always the same stuff. It's not that we have something which can help drastically or reduce something drastically. When we talk about hormonal health, on the other hand, we have something which can help, and that's something which works on a thyroid. So having like a supplement which increases our thyroid function and help the thyroid work, we have some of those like multi-component supplement, if you know, of which one is from Supplement Needs. The thyroid stack, which can help keep the levels of our thyroid as long as possible elevated. So it contains all the relevant micronutrients for a good functioning of the thyroid. So we keep that also maybe in, but that's just also for people who feel that their thyroid levels are decreasing and are natural. So that's like something you could implement there, a thyroid stack to help the work of your thyroid.
Okay, so I think that's all we needed to say about the supplements. Now I suggest we move on to the last point, and that is like PEDs, so the steroids and the fat burners that we use during the cut, So that's only for those of you who are enhanced. So if you're natural, you can skip this section, or how to say. So how would you approach the PEDs during the cutting period when trying to get lean, ready for summer? Like what steroids would you use, at what dosages? What steroids would you not use or not recommend using during the cutting period? And then also let's touch the fat burners. So like what fat burners to use, and like what dosages, like when to start them, like and all that,
As for the PEDs, it's always not medical advice. We are not medical professionals, etc., etc. Just for educational purposes
and entertainment purposes only.
Perfect, thank you. So, as we talk for PEDs, I don't know anybody of you guys out there, but basically we always have the bioidentical hormones in our system, testosterone. We would keep that at a certain level where we aromatize enough. It will be always at that level. So basically, if you're doing a cut or a bulk, we will keep it at that level where we aromatize enough, not too much, not too low, just to keep the functioning of E2 in our system very good. And the rest of it, it's basic. We just fill up with DHTs. Especially in a cut, we wouldn't start to use 19 North, especially just because it's a summer cut. So if I have somebody who's just cutting for the summer, I don't need him on a high toxicity level just by using Tren. So we have DHTs at our proposal. So we have to take them from the tree and put them into the system as much as needed for a person in this specific kind of scenario. So it can be from 200 mg to up to 500 to 700 mg per week. So that's especially context dependent for a person. How long is she in a cut? How much is she retaining muscle mass? If I have somebody who's a very musculature guy, who have a lot of muscle, I would tend to put them on a slightly higher dose, maybe 500 mg and 200 test. If I have somebody who's a little bit slightly lower musculature, 200 to 300 mg of must or something like else. So DHT based anything. For the fat burners, we have at our disposal Yohimbine, as I said before, for the normal stuff, which can also be a PED, and also clenbuterol. Clenbuterol is the one which I see has the biggest impact, which can work good stuff, a lot of good stuff in the system for a fat loss goal, and GH, especially fasted in the morning, can help with that.
And what about the thyroid hormones during the summer prep? Like, would you only use them if a person is, if it has hypothyroidism, or would you like throw them in any case just to boost the metabolism?
Exactly. As you see, I talked beforehand about the thyroid decrease. So you can choose the thyroid stack. If it doesn't work enough and we see the hypothyroidism kicks in, we can start to go on a hormonal replacement therapy for the thyroid hormones. Just by knowing that the factors we put into the diet, like eating a low amount of calories, having a very high expenditure, can be the same as in other different diseases where people get hypothyroidism. So people have a very high expenditure, they have hypothyroidism also because they eat a very, very small amount. So these two factors always put into the context of a contest prep or a diet will always need to look at the blood values. Are you in a hypothyroid scenario? And then based off that, your HRT. So we're not doing something different than any medical professional would do. In the end, if you would do something like that, just please consult always with your medical professional. But the hormonal replacement therapy would always begin with the monotherapy of T4 by 100 micrograms. And if it doesn't elevate the levels enough, you would implement T3 by 25 milligrams.
Okay.
Micrograms.
So
Yeah.
I think it's micrograms.
Micrograms, yeah.
Yes. Okay, so to conclude on short about the drugs, so you would say like use testosterone as a base, so we have enough conversion to estrogen, not too much, not too little, and then fill the other like milligrams with DHTs. So probably with DHTs you meant things like masteron, primobolan, anavar, maybe some winstrol for the end, just to have that like a very dry, hard look, you know.
For the photo shooting, maybe.
Yeah, and probably like you meant those four, like, or did you have any other in mind? Like probably I wouldn't really use for the summer, perhaps something like Superdrol or Anadrol or anything like that. I think those four are more than enough, you know.
Exactly. You have there a very big arsenal from drugs you can take. You don't need more. It's not something that's complicated. Just look by a pathway of how they work. They work by anabolic cascades. So we need those during a time where we are trying to get as lean as possible. So having these into our system will also increase the amount of anabolism we can increase in our body. So maybe we even build some muscle. But to using a 19-hour steroid, an NPP or a DECA is very useless during that time, because you will retain a lot of water and you will worsen your look.
So, for example, what I would do in this scenario, let's say if I'm now prepping for the summer, you know, I would start my cycle with like 2 injectables or maybe some pre-workout anavar. So like, let's say testosterone plus masteron or testosterone plus primobolan. And then I would save an oral for the end of the cut when I want to look my best. So for example, I would do test plus masteron, test plus primo. And then for the last, let's say, I don't know, 6 to 8 weeks, I would throw in either Anavar or Winstrol or something like that, you know. So would you agree with that?
For the oral drugs, as we know, if the person is prone to liver enzyme increase, we can reduce it to the last 2 weeks, just because we don't want to have like the elongation of the increase of the liver enzymes. But if the person is not prone to those, yes, you can definitely do it by your way. I will always tend to think about, okay, how much of a cosmetic effect can Anavar and Winstrol do? They do that by basically, they have like a half-life of 4 hours. So basically, in those 4 hours, they already work on those main cascades. So having those in a short period of time, they will do the relevant stuff for the look I want to generate. If I'm in the off season, that's a completely different story how long I take those. But in the prep, I don't want, in a cut especially, I don't want to have like an unnecessary amount of high drug use.
Okay.
So keeping those to the end.
Yeah, that's why I said either Winstrol or Anavar, because like, for example, if someone has like a really bad genetic response, or like his liver values go too high from taking orals, then he can maybe, instead of going with harsher oral like Winstrol, he can do some Anavar, because usually Anavar is like much better tolerated by the liver than Winstrol is. And yeah, then about the fat burners, you said euhimbine, clenbuterol, HGH if a person can afford it, and T3 and T4 only if a person is hyperthyroidism. So you probably, if a person doesn't have hypothyroidism, it's stupid to throw in T3 and T4, or...
It's not stupid, it's just by increasing the amount of expenditure, by increasing the thyroid hormones, you will also increase hunger signaling. So
yes, but also, wouldn't you like, if someone already has high T3 and T4 levels, and you start throwing in thyroid medications, like you can literally go catabolic, because like...
Exactly, that's what I meant.
Yeah.
So you will increase on the high amount of expenditure the person has, already again more, so you will have maybe double the amount. I don't know how the person will convert it, but you will double the amount of the T3, T4, and you will in the end increase the expenditure so drastically that the hunger signaling will unnecessarily increase. The anti-anabolic properties of T3 and T4 will also increase, so you will have immediately a person who will lose easier muscle mass, even if she or he is enhanced. So if you talk like somebody taking 700 mg of androgens, it's possible with a huge ton of T3, T4 to still be catabolic, but in the end, you wouldn't do that. You would just put the necessary drug in when it's needed. Drugs are always very context dependent and very difficult to say by one off as we do right now, but it's always what is the person doing and how is the person doing it.
Okay. And maybe just the last question about the drugs, like at what point in the cut would you implement fat burners? Like how would you know like now is the time to throw in fat burners?
The right time to throw in fat burners is the time where we would exponentially increase the cardio and reduce the calories drastically. So if we are somewhere at the point where we see, okay, the person needs to cut very drastically, yet right now in the calories or increase drastically in expenditure, we can start to increase the drug amount by increasing the clenbuterol or the yohimbine, and just put basically one drug at a time in and see how it works on a system of a person.
Okay.
Having like somebody who needs also these anti-catabolic properties can help also increase yohimbine and clenbuterol. So putting directly both of those into the system will also have slightly anti-catabolic properties.
Okay, thank you, Anadi. So I think that's pretty much it for today's podcast. Is there anything else you want to add?
No, like a slight summary maybe for the people.
Yeah, that's what I wanted to say now. It's to ask you to do like a short conclusion. So to like conclude everything we said today in like, I don't know, 5 minutes or so for the finish.
Let's make 2 minutes.
So yeah, if I ask you, if I'm like a total newbie now and I come to you, hey Anadi, I want to prep for the summer. Let's say we are, I don't know, 16 weeks to summer. I am now 16% body fat. I want to get down to 9% body fat. How should I do it? How should I approach it nutrition-wise, cardio-wise, drug-wise?
You would, for 16 weeks, you would be at a too low body fat. So I need to have more. No, just kidding. But
okay.
You can also, you can also, if it's very funny, but just for a few words for the end, you can calculate how much body fat somebody has to throw off. So if you want somebody to have like 8% body fat and he has like 16 at the time, we know that's like difference between 8 to 16, 8%. And doing that by math, you can say, okay, all right, if I look at the body, we have 16%. If we want to get to 8%, he has to drop like 10 kilos, let's say, by the weight he has. So I can just look how much weight he needs to lose in this period of 16 weeks and set him up for these 16 weeks by the deficit I put in or the expenditure I put in. So I see by the data he sends me weekly how much he loses, but that's for coaches. So if somebody comes to me and says, hey, Anadi, I want to lose weight, how do I do it? You start. You look at your food, you look at your cardio, look at your expenditure by steps, and start with those three. How much are you eating? Reduce that by 200 to 300 calories to get into a deficit. How much are you spending calories by your expenditure or by steps or by fidgeting or by walking just here and there in your office or something? Look at that, those 2 points first. Where's your cardio? Are you doing already some faster cardio? Can you do some faster cardio? Do that, implement that. Implement that not by like 100 minutes per week, like start slow. Implement like 1 times cardio per week. Implement it 2 times per week. Implement it 4 times per week. That's the amount you need to drop weight. So 4 times per week is okay. Doing like the amount that the person always needs is always for us relevant. And then you work during that period of time of those 16 weeks to get down to your body fat. So 10 kilo you have to drop during a time period of 16 weeks will be like something of like 800 grams, 750 grams maybe to get into the shape you want. Yeah, maybe. So we will be at the time point where you see, okay, if you start to plateau, you increase your expenditure, you increase your cardio. If you see, okay, you start to have a catabolic effect, you start to input certain drugs. Even especially if you're not natural, you would maybe have already some test base into your system, and then just increase the DHT to 200 to 300 mg. That's the point where you would see that you increase also the fat burning components, your yohimbine and clenbuterol in the morning. And if you have the money for that, increase it maybe in half the time, like in 8 weeks. After 8 weeks, increase also the GH to 2 IUs in the morning. And that's how we would continue. Continue as long as needed with an increase if you don't drop with the weight. If you drop with the weight, don't change anything. If you stale, change anything. You can change expenditure, you can change food, you can change your drugs, but always think about drugs as the least one thing you change. Change always these two first until you have to do a drastic drop or drastic increase. And then you choose the third one. Have it always as the last option.
Okay. I think that's pretty much it for today's podcast. For you guys, like always, don't forget to like, subscribe, comment to support the channel's growth. If you need anything like online coaching or you have any questions, you can DM either me or Anadi on Instagram, as we are both coaches. Anadi, for you, thank you for being on my podcast again, and see you in the next one.
Bye-bye, guys.